Hi, welcome back to another episode of Cold Stream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's video, we're going to start working on another project that came into the shop. I introduced it a couple episodes ago. It belongs to a friend of ours. He's got a 32 5-window coupe that we helped him pick up. He also got this 32 Ford frame. I kind of described it before. This 32 Ford frame was a chassis at one point in time. I think that it had a Jaguar front and rear end on it. Had the ends cut off of it and a bunch of different things. So what he wants us to do is basically clean up some of the welds, redo some of the welds, and also put together the subframe. He's bought the United Pacific Subrails for a 5-window coupe. He has a couple original pieces here that we're going to try and fit into it or make, but essentially he needs the subframe built up. And then ultimately he's going to bring us the coupe body. The coupe body was actually missing one of the B-pillars, so we've got a couple original 32 Ford B-pillars here that are going to need some serious love, but they are actually original ones, so you can actually see through them a little bit there. So we're going to have to fix those up as well. There's a couple other things around the shop here we also have to start working on as well. The camera lady's chassis, there's not a lot to do with it. We had stripped the chassis down. There's a couple places I needed access to put some gussets in place and finish a couple welds up. That's really not going to take a whole lot of time. So the ultimate goal on this chassis is in the next probably 4 or 5 weeks, once it warms up, we're going to get it on a rotisserie over there and we'll drop the curtains and we'll put some paint onto it. But that won't be this episode. The other bit of housekeeping I have to do, I've got to get the Y-block motor onto a cart so that I can get some of the parts off of it in anticipation for moving the Y-block we're going to use, which is over there, back on here to swap out a few parts onto it. So don't know if we'll get to that. I'd really like to get that out of the way from a housekeeping point of view, but the primary thing this week, we're going to start working on this 5-window coupe chassis, and then we'll pick away on some of the stuff on Brenda's Roadster as well as we get the parts in. So a little bit of everything in the shop this week, but that's what's going on so far.
And what are you going to call it?
Brian's 5-window? I guess. Brian's 5-window coupe. That's this one. Well, I know I said I was going to work on the 5-window project, but the pigtail for the lights came in today. So it is right there. I've wired it in place. I went through the wiring diagram from Easy Wire and got everything all hooked up. And then the other issue is that the light switch was too short. So basically what's going on is that the light switch hole was pre-drilled. Then we made the decision to put this extra support piece, which goes along where my fingers are. I think you can see it right there. So that gives the whole cowl section some rigidity. Unfortunately, what that then does is it interferes with where the light switch would go. So the light switch would normally come up in behind this hole here, but it comes up against this bar now. So what I've done is I've made an extension. You can see it right here. Now it wasn't that straightforward because the hole that goes, the threaded hole that goes into the GM light switch was like a metric M11 by 10 millimeter or something. So what I had to do was take that nut, which is right there, weld a piece of tubing onto it. We had to extend it by, I think, 1 5/8 inches. And then what I did is I took a 7/16 fine thread nut and bolt. I welded this nut onto the tubing and then drilled down the center of this bolt. So now, if I undo this bolt, it's hollow. And then it's quite long, but that's okay. That's all the better. It's nice and strong. So then I can put this in the dash. The other thing, I had another one of these light pieces from another project. So I had to extend this rod also by 1 5/8 inches. So going to put that in here. I trial fitted it already. It should be good to go, and I'll show you in a second. So there's a light switch in. It it functions well. I mean, the final test will be once we hook the power up to it. But if I wired things up properly and followed the instructions, which I'm quite sure I did, it should work just fine. The wires don't hang down that much, so nice and neat, which way we want it. And now we're off to the next task. So today I'm picking away at a number of different things here in the shop. We are going to get on to Brian's 32 chassis and the Subrails. That's going to be later on the episode. In the short term, I had a few things I needed to deal with in the shop. One of them was getting the Y block off of the engine stand. I need to get that off because I want to get at a few parts. And then, like I said, ultimately get the other Y block up onto the stand. But first I needed basically a cradle to stick it on. So I grabbed a bunch of bits and pieces of metal and whatnot. I did have this little generic 1,000-pound engine stand that came with another engine, but it doesn't bolt up to the Y block, unfortunately, very easily. So I just cobbled up a few things here just in order to get it on the cart here. The one thing about the Y block is that the weight of the engine is mostly in the center, so I kind of had to build like a little stand like you see here with a little cantilever portion on the front so the engine wouldn't tip forward if I moved it around. And then I built the cradle in the back for the bell housing. Once I get a couple more pieces of metal, I'm probably going to bridge these two sections here so you don't have the possibility of it wobbling or whatever in the future. More than likely we'll get to use that a few more times as we work on the old stuff here. So anyway, that problem is solved for the time being. The other thing, for Brenda's Roadster, they dropped off a battery for it. So one thing we had to do was make a battery box. This is a relatively small one, but we're going to make it a little bit bigger. So we needed to make a battery box for both Brenda's Roadster and the Camera Lady's Roadster. So kind of came up with this little basic design that you see right here. Ultimately, what we're going to do, the battery will fit in there, and then I will build like a little piece like this that goes across, and then we'll have like rods holding the battery into the battery box. But right now, that's the basic design. I've used that kind of design before. So started cutting out, I had some 1/8 plate. You could probably use 14 gauge to be strong enough, but just having the 1/8 plate, what we're gonna do, I've cut out 2 of these right now. The piece I had was big enough to kind of make it, I'll be able to fold these pieces. Now the 1/8 will not bend in my brake. So I set up the 1/8 in 2 sections here because our battery box, or the Camera Lady's battery box, is going to be a little bigger. Typically I use an F-150 battery, which is a little overkill, but that's what I've used in all of my cars. So if I ever have to swap between them, the box is big enough to hold it. So, and they're not that expensive compared to the other ones. So we made ours a little bit bigger. So what I've done, I've just taken the mini grinder and I've basically ground a little notch in here, which is going to allow me to be able to fold these as the first part of the box. And then once I fold these up, I'll make the side pieces. So these little side pieces here, I'll make and weld those on. So I probably won't set a time lapse up, but I'll stop and I'll show you how we make them a little bit more detailed than what I normally do. So anyways, we're going to carry on making these 2 battery boxes. So there's the next step in the battery box. It's tipped on its back right now. I had enough material in order to make 2 sides. So Brenda's Roadster, I chose to do hers first. So we had enough material to make the sides. For the Camera Lady's Roadster, we still don't, I've got to go buy some metal to finish off the side pieces. So right now I welded all around the sides, and then along the bottom there where I had basically cut it so I could bend it, I welded the full length of that as well. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to grind everything all smooth. We're going to then make the holes for the battery hold down and a bracket for that. Then the other part we'll go over and we'll fit that on Brenda's Roadster, more than likely add a flange somewhere along the bottom so where it bolts onto the reinforcing support or the reinforcing bar behind the seat. So we'll position it there so it kind of balances, and it bolts onto that for a nice rigid hold down. So pushing on with making the battery box. So there's a finished battery box with 2 coats of paint onto it. I put another bracket across the back there. As you see, I welded it on with 3 holes into it. That's what's going to mount on the support behind the seats. Now, I used the trim-clad fast drying black enamel. I thought I covered everything really well, but I've got one spot here that it didn't cover well enough, so gonna have to wait 48 hours, as it says on the can, to put another coat onto it. I don't know if you guys have tried using the Rust-Oleum or the trim-clad spray bombs. If you try and paint something more than an hour after you just painted it, it all wrinkles up and goes funny on you. So I guess we have to wait for this paint to cure in order to go put it in the Roadster. So it's all ready. We'll put it in later in the episode along with the battery. But in the meantime, I'm going to switch gears over here. We're going to work on the subrails for Brian's 5-window coupe. Now, the subrails are very high quality United Pacific subrails. Quite happy with them. They fit really nice. He had one of the cross pieces here, which it actually looks to be from a sedan because it's oversized, but also it's been sitting in the water for a really long time and the edges are crispy. It's not a real one, it's a reproduction. Now, I could probably fix this, but the amount of work it would take to fix it is about the same as what it would be to make another one. So that's what I've done. I've come over here, I've laid out, I've done a couple trial pieces to get the bending radiuses right and the width right and everything else. So I'm all set up now. I've got a couple blanks set up, ready to go. So this is the shape that we're going to need. We're also going to have to make this flange tip up a little, so I'll show you that after I make the 2 cross members. So I've got one blank cut up over here right now for one piece that's 5 inches wide. Going to get ready to cut the second one, which is 6 inches wide, and then I'm going to take it over in the brake and I'm going to bend it up. So I'm planning to set the time lapse up for this to show you how it was done. So there's the 2 cross pieces. As you notice, I kind of had to tweak it a little bit with the hammer. And one of the reasons is that the main reinforcing piece, I had to remove that piece off of the front of the brake here, right here. So that normally keeps a lot of rigidity into it. So when this brake it's not at the max, but it's close to the max with 18 gauge over the 42 inches long. It is rated a little bit heavier. But the thing is that sometimes when you bend it, you've got to make sure that it's straight. So you've got to take the hammer and kind of tweak things back, overbend it or whatever the case is. So just got to play with it a little bit. So anyways, we've got these 2 pieces made up. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to cut them to length And then, like I said, I've got to take this particular flange here, and we're going to zip a little cut into it, and we're going to do a little Z with it coming up. I've done that before. I'll show you what I'm doing so that it'll clear when it goes on to the subrails. So there's the two Subrail cross braces I've made up. I tried to show you in the time lapse there how I cut the ends and basically allowed for an overlap. What you want is for this piece here to be at the same level as this for when you put the floor pan in. So on the originals, there's actually a little bump up there. And if you buy reproductions, you can see where they've done the same thing. So what I've got to do now is I'm going to go along and I'll make sure that these are the right heights. I think that they are. And then I'm going to put a little bit of weld on each one of those. And then what we'll do is we'll put a bunch of holes here so that then we can spot weld those onto those tabs underneath. So anyway, carrying on here with the subrails for Brian's 5-window. So there's all the holes drilled for me to do the spot welds. I punched some holes here on that tab, and you can see where I've welded this in place. So we've now got the lip that goes where it's supposed to. This is the original ones were stamped. Like I said, the reproduction ones are made this way. So right now I might put another clamp on this one to make sure it's down far enough. And then I'm going to get the welder and I'll weld up all these spots here all the way around, and we'll get her nice and flat here. And then I'm either going to, once I get that done, I'll work on a floor pan to go in here, or I've got another project in a few minutes to work on Brenda's car. So follow along. So what I'm going to do for Brian's subrails right now is I'm going to make this floor section. I'm not sure if I'm going to weld it in just yet, but I want to get it made up. Typically when I'm building subrails and stuff for the Roadsters and whatnot, I usually made up the subrails and then put this piece of the floor in as I was building the car. It just gives the subrails a little more rigidity and shape and stuff. So what we'll do is we're going to cut out a piece of sheet metal, the shape of this. And then what we need to do is replicate, I want to replicate it looking like this panel now. On the original 32 Roadster and 32 Coupes and whatnot, this section underneath the seat, actually, it was kind of dipped in. But nowadays, when we're building the hot rods, because we have cross members here, we need a flat panel here. Because with the older ones, there was no larger cross member. They had the K member over here. Everything was empty there, and if I'm not mistaken, the battery was here. And underneath the seat, because it had pockets, they could store stuff underneath the seat, maybe tools, not really sure what, but there was actually it was like a cavity or whatever. So, but the plan for Brian's is to replicate this panel the same way that Brookville does. I have to do the beads like you see here, and then we need to make these little indentations here because they're going to correspond to underneath where the subrails are. So we want the floor actually to sit down on the lips. To do so, these recesses have to be built up on both sides. So I'm going to do that to the panel. I'll show you how I do it, and then we'll get this part done. So I forgot we actually had an original floor section here for a 32 Roadster or 5-window coupe. We have one over here right there on the International Roadster. So you can see how an original, they've got like pockets here for underneath the seat. And again, I'm just showing you this for reference, what the original had. This is not what we're going to do. We're going to do the flat panel like I just described. So anyway, follow along. On the table here, I've got the cutout piece to make the floor. And what I've been doing is playing around with a way to make features like this. What we need to do is we need to put one here, one on each one of the corners on both ends. And what that does, as I showed just earlier there, that allows them to, they need to step up in order to fit over the top of here, here, and here. So there's 6 spots that we need to do that on this piece of sheet metal. If I had like a power hammer or a Pullmax or something, I could probably make some dies up. But essentially what I've done is I've taken 2 pieces of scrap metal. There's a piece of 1/4 inch here and a piece of 3/16 wedged underneath there. And then what I'm going to do is take this piece of metal here, use it kind of like as a punch, and then work my way around here to form that indent. So I'll put the time lapse on, I'll show you doing 1, and then I'll try and get all 6 of them done. Once those are done, then we'll move on to doing the bead rolling. So there's the end result. We've got the 6 different places where we've relieved the metal. I did the same thing just like we did in the time lapse there. I just carried on. I showed you me doing it in the center. I just turned it sideways. I did each corner. And now the metal is relieved the way that it is on the other panel that I showed you in the other Roadster. Now the only thing I have left to do now is we're going to lay out the places where the beads are. I'm going to pre-stretch the metal and then I'm going to run it through on the bead roller. So I'll put that on time lapse and I'll show you that as well. So there's the panel with all the beads rolled into it. Now, if you look very closely, where you start the beads, there's not really a very nice round start or stop to it. The same way with the intersection. Now, what we're going to do now, I've done this before. You can buy these tools, but essentially this is a piece of 1/2 inch water pipe. I have cut it off. I've made like a half moon shape like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take it over to the stump. I'm then going to take this and I'm going to give her a whack there on each one of these corners. And what that'll do is it'll give a nice round finish. So they'll actually look like a rounded bead, like a pressed bead. Done it before. Those of you seen it, those of you haven't, it's pretty simple. You don't need something expensive. You just basically need a half moon shaped piece of pipe that's the right shape of the bead you want to form, and hit it with a hammer. So watch along. There's the finished product with all the beads rolled into it and all the ends all rounded off. Also, when we did the T, we kind of overlapped a little bit. I used a small punch, a round-headed punch. I just laid it down here somewhere, but essentially just, you saw me take a round-headed punch and kind of relieve this area where I kind of overlapped a little bit. So now We've got the same look as what that panel was that I showed you over into Brenda's Roadster. Also, we have the same thing in our, the camera lady's 32 Roadster. Not the same thing as the International, because the International Roadster has an original floor, but this looks exactly like a reproduction one that you're going to buy. You can buy them, and like I said, one of the issues here in Canada right now is that, you know, we can buy these, but I mean, there's a big dollar value in the exchange rate, then there's shipping costs, and unfortunately there's now tariffs on top of all that, plus our provincial sales tax on top of it. So it gets quite pricey. So that's one of the reasons why we work and make our own pieces here in the shop when we can. We buy it when it makes sense. But when it doesn't, we make them. So this piece here is ready to have some, what we would normally do now is we'll punch a couple holes in here to make the, for the spot, imitation spot welds. It's kind of sputtering a little bit there. But right now, if I take that, we'll take it over here and we will fit it in the Subrails, and you'll see that it looks the way we want it to. Just kind of weaving our way through here, and it should fit in here just fine. There we go. So that's it. That's the floor pan that goes underneath the seat for a 32 Coupe or a 32 Roadster. You can do the same thing yourself. Anyways, we're going to carry on here. Approaching cutoff time for videoing and that, so not much left here. So finally got some paint onto the second round of paint on the black box here for the battery. We've got it all in place right now. It's bolted to the supporting structure that goes around behind the seat. We made a clamp for it to hold the battery down. I know it's a little dark in there. I decided to put some rubber around it. Not necessary to put a little rubber around it, but by putting the rubber there, when I go to put the battery terminals on, I will have less chance of actually bumping up against something metal. Don't want to do that. It's not good, makes sparks. So there it is, as you can see it from behind the seat. Now, in the short term, they're not going to upholster the seat or upholster the inside of the car until they shake everything down. Then it'll come back at some point, I guess, to get the upholstery done. So with the type of seat that's going in, it folds forward. There'll be a panel on the back that can come off to access the battery box from behind the seat, or you can bend over and access it from inside of the trunk as well. So right now, that's it for the battery box. We still have to make a ground cable for it. We have the positive cable coming out of the floor. I got to put an end on it. I'm not going to hook anything up just yet because we still have to connect the front and rear lights up. So that'll be in a future episode, but there's the battery box in. So here we are. It's end of video week this week, so kind of have to wrap things up. So kind of just concluding what we've done this week on Brian's 5-window coupe. We've got the subrails kind of laid in place. We made the two support pieces, and now we've got the floor section made up. So I stepped through how I made the floor section. I'm not going to weld that in place just yet. When I do, like I said, I'm going to use a hole puncher and punch a bunch of holes, and we'll simulate like the spot welds of going in there. I did get around to putting a gusset on the camera lady's frame there for the steering support thing, picking stuff off, because unfortunately we're still waiting to get a few parts come in. We're going to go over to the other building and we'll finish it off over there. So on Brenda's Roadster, we got the battery box in, managed to install the light switch, put an extension onto it, and then worked on a couple smaller things. I greatly thank everybody that reached out to me to tell us about what lower radiator hose to use. There's a Daco hose that we can use. We can buy it. We cut it up. Everything looks like it's going to work. I ordered 2 of them to work on to connect the flathead to the radiator. Should be in the next couple days. As soon as they are, I'll let everybody know how they made out with them. Another thing we were struggling with, and I'm kind of appealing to some of the 32 Ford guys, the hood hinge strip here. Now, we have our own hood hinge strip that we took it off of our car and used it on this one because we bought one from Speedway and it doesn't have like the right shape, we'll insert a picture. It's kind of flattened on the bottom. Now, I also took the one off of the Camera Lady's Roadster, but it's got the right shape. Has anybody had experience with the hood hinge strips and the shape of them? I'm thinking that we need to specifically get the Vintique ones because they have a rounder shape to them. When I use this, the hood will go up and down and flatten out. If I use the one we got from Speedway, which I think is an import one, I'm not knocking Speedway because we got lots of good stuff from them. I'm just struggling with this one particular hood end strip because when I put it in, the hood will only go down there. It absolutely will not flatten out. The other thing with the radiator hoses, the upper radiator hoses, someone emailed me about using a tractor style hose that went from 1.25 to 1.75 inches. We still haven't solved our problem from the upper radiator hose. If anybody knows what that hose part number is, I greatly appreciate it if you send the comments on to it. So like I said, we got the lower one I think is solved because folks have given us, actually 2 folks reached out to us, one from Ontario, one from I think Saskatchewan, and told us what they used and put on their own cars. So like, fingers crossed it's going to work for us too. But the upper radiator hose, where we have to go from 1.25 inches at the thermostat to 1.75 inches up at the radiator. Still got to work on that one. But anyways, we're working through the problems on Brenda's Roadster. When we have the parts, we're going to work on it. Otherwise, we're going to keep pushing ahead on Brian's 5-window coupe build, helping him put the body back onto the frame and fixing his frame up. But that's it for this week. Hopefully you enjoyed. Please like, share, tag, and subscribe. Send me your comments and come on back next week.